test
It's
out the
11
chat
o'clock.
panel. It is 11 o'clock. Okay. So we're having everyone test out the chat panel. If you can look on your Zoom interface and find the chat panel, you'll be able to select all panelists or all panelists and attendees in the message composition window of your chat panel. So if you want everyone to see your message, if you're asking a question that will be useful for everyone to see, then we recommend selecting all panelists and attendees before you send your message, like this. So I just sent in a message like that to everybody. All right, great. Looks like we've got several people in. It is really great to have you today. I think we can go ahead and start things off. So today we're going to be talking about mobile learning strategy and design. And we will be led by Clark Quinn, who is a mobile learning expert and an industry veteran and an all-around nice guy, I would say. And also Christopher Allen will be helping to monitor the chat panel and to field some questions. And I'll be assisting him as well. I think at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Christopher, who just waved. And we talked about the chat panel already, but we'll turn things over to Christopher. And Christopher, would you give us maybe more of a detailed introduction about yourself and about our main presenter, Clark?
Sure. Well, I'm super excited to have Clark Quinn joining us today. The Allen Academy is a project that we've been working on at Allen Interactions for a while in hopes to find a better way to help support professionals in our field gain the confidence and experience that they need to branch out and try new things. And we're collecting and collaborating with as many experts as we know in the field to put together really interesting programming that has relevance today and tomorrow. And for that very specific reason why we are more than pleased to have Clark Quinn join us today. His expertise in the field and on this particular topic, I think, is pretty well known for a long time and has written some really wonderful books and materials on mobile learning design and strategy. So Clark will be joining us today to give a presentation on some of those topics, and we'll be talking a little bit about some of the experiences that you could gain in the Allen Academy. I think we have maybe a slide or two that talks about some upcoming opportunities. If I hit advance, does it go anywhere? But we've got, yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. We've got a couple of things. One is we've got an introductory class in the Academy titled "Boring is Bad." We're going to be looking at what makes effective learning and to point out some kind of key and easy things to do to really engage with learners and provide a pretty positive experience. That starts on May 4th. But on May 6th, as is pertinent to today's discussion, Clark Quinn's going to be kicking off an elective for us on mobile learning strategy and design. And we'd really be thrilled if that was something that you were interested in and come and take a look. And then on May 18th, we've got another course starting up as part of our ACIP program on the basics of instructional interactivity. And one of the things that we've tried to hallmark with all of these courses is the opportunity to practice and do real work. And so as part of the electives and the courses, you get an opportunity to share and get mentored by really some fantastic industry experts. And in these offerings, that includes Clark Quinn, Ethan Edwards, and Dan Thornton. The other thing that's pretty exciting that I think was maybe the slide that we skipped just before is that we've also got a really great partnership with Credly and Acclaim. And with each one of these experiences, students will have a chance to earn a micro badge or a digital credential that has pointed evidence back to the experiences that they gained in the academy and a little bit of information about where those new skills were applied. So, all these courses are designed really for practice and application. And we want to be able to make sure that you as a student have an opportunity to show how those things are different than maybe going to, a 2-day webinar or something and just having the experience to listen. This really is about doing interesting work, and we want to make sure that you've got a great platform to display that work. So with that tiny little pitch, I'm going to turn it over to Clark to give us a great preview of many of the things that he's been working on in mobile learning strategy and design, and hopefully have some good discussion today around those topics.
Okay, there we go. Share screen. Oops. Ended up on the wrong slide. Let me briefly fix this up. Hi, folks. I'm just getting ready to go, and I'm realizing I'm not quite as ready as I thought I was, because we did a test and I didn't fix things back again. There we go. All right. So,
Success.
how are you all doing? Let me just open up the chat window, because we're going to be using the chat and I wanted to have it open. So I'm going to, as you see, I'm sharing my screen, and boom, we're going big. All right. So thank you, Christopher, for that gracious introduction, and Ellen for setting the stage. I want to welcome you all here. And I want to start by thinking about the term mLearning itself. What does that bring to mind for you? What do you think about when you think about mLearning? And I want to suggest that it's really easy when you think of the M mobile and you look at the learning word, it's really easy to think about it's about courses on a phone, right? And yet, I want to suggest that that's not correct. I want to suggest that's not the way to think about it. And instead, I want you to be thinking, we're going to talk today about how we might think more broadly about what mLearning might actually be. So today we're introducing mLearning. I'm Clark Quinn. I'm Quinnovator on Twitter, if you have that affliction of Quinnovation. I'll give you a little bit more background about me, just so you understand the strange and twisted way I look at the world and can interpret what I say in those terms. I saw the connections between computers and learning as an undergraduate, designed my major, and it's been my career ever since. My first job was designing and programming educational computer games, and I realized we didn't know enough, and I went back to get a PhD in what was effectively applied cognitive science, taking what we know about how we think, work, and learn, and applying that to the design of solutions. And it's led to a number of things, games, and looking at the broader picture of how technology can facilitate learning and development, learning science and myths. But in particular for today, it led to thinking about mobile as well. I was very lucky to get early in and was graciously welcomed by a couple of the pioneers in mobile learning, and got a chance to get steeped in it and to help communicate that to some other folks. So that's going to shape the thinking we're talking about here and going forward. So the first question is why? I mean, in some sense, isn't mobile already here? Isn't it? Why are we thinking about it now? Is there anything unique? And I think it's interesting to think that there are 13.1 billion mobile connected devices predicted by 2023. This is data that comes from Cisco. They have been regularly predicting the growth of digital communications. They have a vested interest. It's a small company involved in the backbone hardware. So they've regularly been predicting it. Now this starts with about 2023. They were doing this from 2018. They used to be doing it every year. You could look ahead 5 years. This one, as of March, they're sticking with the 2018 to 2023. But look at the growth of devices, 13.1 billion mobile devices. I mean, that's a phenomenal number. And it's up from 8.8 billion, but we're still getting 8.3% cumulative annual growth rate. They also said 1.6 mobile connected devices per capita by 20, per capita. That's more devices than people. And if you think of some places where people don't have many devices, that means a lot of us are carrying more than one device. And you can be thinking that may well be yourself as well, right? How many people do you know who have, maybe 2 phones, let alone? And that's up from 1.2 per capita in 2018. Now, interestingly, they're talking about 300 billion mobile applications downloaded by 2023. That's up from 194 billion in 2018, 2 years ago. So they're predicting continued growth in mobile apps. Now, 117.3 billion of those are social networking, messaging, media, personal productivity, e-commerce mobile applications, not relevant to us, which is growing 5.6, not a lot. But this is the one that's of interest to us. 116 billion other category, including business mobile applications downloaded by 2023. And that is a big growth. This is the growth area for mobile. So business uses of mobile applications are the biggest growth rate predicted in mobile. So interestingly, even though mobile has been around and has been growing phenomenally, it's not slowing down. So there's a lot of action and a lot of opportunity, I want to suggest. So where have we, what is the trajectory in a sense? What are we looking at? We started with the smartphone. Now, let's be honest. Before the iPhone, there was the Trio, for instance. It was a PDA and a phone in one. I had one. I loved it. I, in fact, waited to get the iPhone until at least they had cut, copy, and paste predicted for it. But it really made the notion of a smartphone, a phone that was a phone, but also really a little digital platform, possible. And then it sort of bifurcated. We started seeing this weird different form factor transition. We went to the tablet, then we went to small tablets, then we went to big tablets, even to phones. And look, this isn't stopping. We've got every gradation of size and capability coming. Our watches can now be a phone, and our, tablets, there's every shape and size. And, we've had the experiments with the Google Glass, but that's predicted to come back in some form or another. For all I know, we're going to have smart rings and smart pendants. There's just a lot of things that can and should be happening that we want to be thinking about. Now, you notice that there wasn't a laptop. Is a laptop a mobile device? Sure, it can be decoupled from the, hard linked into the infrastructure and can be mobile around, but I want to suggest it's not. And this was a big debate early in the days of mobile. It's kind of died, but I think it's really important to understand why. And it's actually a very practical reason for me that just came from thinking about this. To me, I ultimately realized a mobile is something that you can use naturally, standing or walking. A laptop, you can hold it with one arm and do the hunt and peck. That's not the natural use of a laptop. The natural use is typing on the keyboard, which means it needs a support. It's not naturally meant to be standing or walking with. So that to me is kind of a just a heuristic approach that says, is it mobile? There's a caveat to that. There are times when laptops do make sense when they're doing something because of when and where you are. But in general, I think laptops are not mobile. Personal view, you can take it. But Clark, this actually, I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, Clark, I was just going to ask you, is that part because if you're trying to balance a laptop and interface with it, so much of your focus and thinking goes to not dropping the laptop and trying to type something slowly and not being able to focus on the interaction that's the real benefit?
I think that could be a part of it, but to me more it's just what is its natural intention of use? Is it intended to be used while you're standing and moving around, or is it intended to be used, you can take it to the coffee shop and plop it down, but then it's on the table. It becomes a desktop. It's just a desktop that you can move around more easily as opposed to it's naturally a mobile device.
Oh, sure.
But, I think it is right, although people seem to get pretty locked into their phones, so they're not aware of what's going on either.
They do.
That's the best acid test. So, but I found this really interesting. This came from Palm's data way back in the day of the Palm Pilot, and they wrote a lovely document, which you can still find, called the Xenopalm, which is cute and fun and short, and yet actually relatively deep. But one of the things they had was this graph. When they did data analysis, they looked at how people use a laptop versus how people used a mobile device. At that time, this little one. And I find it's just very different. Laptops you sit down and use for a long period of time, not many times a day, because you're using it for a long time. So it's not like, you know, you may go away for lunch and then come back and open it again, but then you tend to be there for a long time versus a mobile device. And tablets kind of fudge this a bit, but this was back in the early days, just the PDA. It tended to be, you popped it out a lot. And you hear about the numbers now about how people use their mobile devices. They pop up thoughts in, you know, they take it out, do something quick and put it away. And I really think that, again, that's more representative of the nature of use of mobile devices. By the way, I do want to mention to our audience, if you have thoughts or questions, I am monitoring the chat. And right now, oh, it says 14 new messages and it hasn't, oh, it's not scrolling. And when I'm presenting folks, I lose the mouse. So, I mean, I lose my cursor, so I can't click on the 14 new messages. So I'm gonna have to ask. I thought I'd be able to monitor the chat, but it's flowing by. It's not flowing for me. And I can't figure out how to click on the button for 14 new messages because I can't get the cursor accurate. So I'm gonna have to ask Ellen and Christopher, who promised to help me monitor the chat. If any questions do come up, would you signal me and let me know we can stop and hear them? Okay, yes. Thank you.
Will do.
All right. So that sort of characterizes to me the way of thinking about mobile devices. And, you know, tablets and phones and most of these things are intended to be used. You can carry your tablet with you and walk around the hospital floor and be doing things. That's, you know, the upper edge of mobile. Just checking your watch for, you know, it vibrates and you know there's a notification, boom. That's, again, the type of characteristic behavior, but it's not sit down for a long time, except when you're watching movies on your tablet or something, but it can be carried. So, and then there comes the question, why do we have this and how do we use it? I want to suggest, and kind of, Michael, this goes back to the question of, you know, mobile devices again. You may take your laptop with you when you go to the coffee shop or something, but it doesn't go with you to the store. It doesn't go with you to, you know, just out and about on a hike, but your phone is always with you. And the question is why? Everybody's got their phone with them almost all the time. Or if it's not, it's a watch or something with them. They are really, you know, we want to be digitally connected these days. And I want to suggest the answer is apps. I will bet two people in the exact same job role or something are likely to have different apps on their phone. We're just different, but we can customize these things to meet our particular preferences and needs to make things happen. But I also want to suggest that there's more, that it's also about the fact that we use these to do things for ourselves. And I want to stop and ask a question, and I may even pop out of this so I can monitor the chat better. So I'm asking you, the audience, how do you use your device to make yourself smarter? And I don't mean, you know, reach out and stay in touch with the family and things. I mean specifically to make you capable of doing things that you weren't able to do. How do you make yourself more effective with these devices? So I'm going to pause the presentation in the sense that I'm going to go look at and see if I can follow the chat. Easy access to learning. So watching video tutorials, interesting. Watching tutorials, reading articles and research on you use that for your mobile devices, not your laptop. Agenda, yes. And ATSKS. Easy access to info, right. You're in a meeting and somebody mentions something you don't know the meaning of. Rather than break the flow of the meeting, you just look it up and can stay in the meeting and things are good. Yeah, Googling stuff, asking Siri, looking at email. Finding the nearest store and restaurant. Yes, location is another interesting opportunity that we see. Ebook readers, good suggestions from Pop. And I know that we can be graphing diagrams on whiteboards. Now we're getting to some of these more interesting ones where I don't want to lose what happened on this whiteboard. I'm going to take a picture, but also taking pictures. How many of you have used it, you know, in the days before now, when you actually still took plane flights, you might have used it to take a picture of where you parked in the garage. So when you came back, you didn't have to remember it was D3. You could just look it up and then you could delete it. Listening to podcasts, video editing. Wow. I'm not sure I do video editing on a phone, but apps like Stack, yeah, lots of communication to stay in touch and be able to comment on things with people, creating events announcements, sure. So I find this interesting, and thank you all for sharing. And I don't, for me, the calendar. And in fact, I have a statement when I talk about mobile to people in audiences. I say, if I make a promise to you and it doesn't get into my device, we never had the conversation. It's my external brain. It remembers things my brain doesn't. It will remember exact dates where I have to do things and send me a reminder to be there. It allows me to take quick notes. It allows me to do a number of things. In fact, back with the Palm, they found there's 4 core apps. So notes, to-dos, calendar, and contacts. How many of you remember the days before smartphones where you have to look up in your PDA a phone number and then type it into your flip phone before you could store things? It's one of the reasons I got a phone was a Trio was I just was tired of doing that one simple task. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now. Thank you all for sharing. So I want to ask, now that we've done all those questions, I want to ask, how much of that was a course? How much of all those things you were doing was actually sitting down and taking a course on your mobile device? Right, none. That's the point I want to make. mLearning, we do powerful things to make ourselves more effective through our phones, and yet none of it really is about taking a course on a phone. And that, to me, is beginning to be the core of mobile thinking, which is what the opportunity is for us. The opportunity for us to be helping people be more effective goes beyond just courses. And that's a perspective that's true for L&D beyond the mobile device. But the mobile device, to me, in World War II, there was this notion of a Q ship. It was a freighter that looked like a target for submarines, but it was full of balsa wood. And so what happened is they shot torpedoes at it, and it hit and bounced, and the submarine would surface, and then the ship would knock down all these walls, and it would be full of guns, and it would just totally destroy the submarine. So it was a stealth way. And to me, mobile is a stealth way of thinking beyond the course into the organization. Okay, sort of an editorial comment, but I really like that one. So let's think about supporting work more broadly than just courses. And I sort of break it up into these 3 ways. There's social interaction and informal learning. It starts with formal learning, of course. There is formal learning. There's a value for formal learning. I'm not one of those who says throw the course out of the organization, but augmenting it with performance support, having social, and mobile is a channel for all this. Underpinning is your content management, knowledge management, learning management, social media systems. But mobile is a way of decoupling that from the desktop and saying where. And more. There's something unique to mobile that adds an extra value. We'll get there. But let's start thinking about formal learning. And one of the things we know is that bullet points and quiz questions are not learning. It doesn't reflect it. And with Michael and the support of Christopher, we did the Series e-learning manifesto and talked about the difference between typical e-learning and series e-learning. One of the things it's not trying to remember a bunch of arbitrary facts and then be tested on it, let alone with quiz questions that are the alternatives are so obvious or silly. You could get this right without ever having studied anything or listened to any bullet points. And yet we see this, and I ask why? It has nothing to do with learning. So what mobile can do is help transform it into effective. Now it's not, again, courses on a phone, it's augmenting form, providing support for ways in which to decouple it from the event model and start move it to a broader picture of learning. Really, our brains are aligned to slow learning. Little bits over time are far more effective than a big content dump. That's the opportunity mobile enables in a really powerful way. So augmenting formal is one of the first ones. Okay, one of the interesting things about our brain is it's really good at pattern matching and meaning making. With a little executive function, we can apply that to problems. But we're really bad at remembering rote and arbitrary information. We're really bad at doing complex calculations. Turns out digital technology is the exact opposite. It's really bad at doing pattern matching and meaning making. It's hard to do machine learning. It takes huge amounts of processing power. But remembering arbitrary and rote information for a long time and doing complex calculations, the limits are what we can program. So when we couple ourselves with these capabilities our brains don't have, we're much more formidable problem solvers. And that's really important because we have this opportunity to do performance support. The technology can be filling in the gaps that our cognitive architecture lacks. Think about it. No architecture is all singing, all dancing. It's going to have strengths and weaknesses. When you couple it with the opposite, you're better. And mobile gives us the ability to do this, not just at the desktop, but taking it wherever and whenever we are, we can be more effective performers. Now, a third thing to think about, and so in one sense, I'm talking about how we think, work, and learn. I was talking about learning and thinking, and now about how we work together. And we originally, when we started doing organized activities, so agriculture and then in industry, not everybody had access to higher education. And so the few people who did the thinking for the many. And if you think back to the Taylorism scientific management stuff, literally people were cogs in a machine. They studied how efficient you could be, how many widgets you could create in an hour, and they looked to optimize that. But you're really being mechanical. We are no longer in an industrial age. We are in an information age, and more people have access to education. And the way you deal with problems that are more complex than any one brain can think of is you tap into the power of multiple brains. And increasingly, this is the opportunity and the necessity for organizations going forward. So a third way mobile can augment us is connecting social. And we see this all the time, people texting. If you have kids, I rarely talk to my daughter on the phone. It's either a lot of texts and occasional a FaceTime. It's not phone calls, but there's a lot of social action, and this is possible. And we saw that in the stream of how people were talking. They talked about using Slack to stay in touch with people and keep on touch with what's going on an ongoing basis. Now, these three in particular are not unique to mobile. These happen at the desktop as well. But it's nice to have them wherever and whenever we are. So there's real power in just mobile devices for these. But there's one more, and this has to do with when we are and where we are and more. We increasingly, these devices have more and more powerful sensors. They have barometers. Some of them that connect to the skin can actually tell about your blood pressure or blood sugar. We have increasingly rich data about what's happening right now. We can capture that, and we'll combine that with the processing power. We're able to do contextual support. Now, I argue, if you remember back to that pattern of the interaction between how we use mobile devices and how we use laptops and computers, that quick access in the moment is very much aligned to performance support. I think performance support is mobile's natural niche. But this notion of doing something because of when and where we are, taking that contextual data, to me, is the unique opportunity that mobile provides for us to think about going forward in what we can be doing to help our people be more successful. So, great. It makes sense for organizations to be thinking about mobile. Does it make sense for L&D to be involved? I kind of want to say yes, because the optimal way to really take advantage of mobile is to align it with how we think, work, and learn. And nobody should know more about how we think, work, and learn than L&D. We're the ones who study the brain and apply what we know about it, or should be. as opposed to, you know, operations or IT engineers don't think like normal people, and there are ways to support normal people don't look like it. And I taught engineers, I know this. They're highly selected to deal with arbitrary and abstract syntax. That's just not normal people. So what can we do? So think about augmenting formal. Go back to, oh, Brenda Cruz asked if I can go back to the last slide. This slide, Brenda, is that the one you're looking for? And can you
I believe
tell me?
so.
Huh?
Yes, I believe so. Yep.
Okay.
Brenda says yes, that's it.
Why she wanted me there, but okay, we're there. You were helping me build new neural nets. How can we connect these four elements? Well, I'm not, you know, I don't know how to pronounce that. So Cheetle. But at any rate, how can we connect these four elements? In one sense, I don't think we need to. They're just different ways of categorizing support and to give us traction and figure out where to apply resources for what we can do. But the other thing is, in another sense, this is sort of a space or a continuum of ways the boundaries begin to blur. When you're augmenting formal, you know, you begin to start thinking about what can be in the world and what has to be in the head. So you're beginning to get a natural blend, and there's more ways to blend about this, but now we're getting into the nuances that we can't cover in just an introduction, right? Xochitl. Oh, okay, flower in ancient Mexican language. Very pretty, thank you. I appreciate you educating me. See, you learn new things when you do this stuff. It's wonderful. So L&D, augmenting formal. So it's not about delivering a whole course, but can we break up courses into meaningful chunks and think about extending the content? Can we create a podcast that augments the content and we can listen to it in our automobiles on our trip home or when we're out exercising? Right now, we don't have any trip commutes to and from work in many cases, but we can still be listening to workouts and things. We can start doing knowledge checks to check how people are understanding at some point in time after the learning experience, because that supports reactivation. It turns out there's multiple ways that we may be creating the key to learning. The reason that slow learning works is you need to reactivate the learning. The reason mass doesn't and space does is because you're reactivating it, generating it, and that gives a chance for those neural connections to strengthen. Only so much strengthening can happen in any one day before you need some sleep, and then can strengthen again the next day. That's why we reactivate. Mobile gives us a chance to do that. And more. Well, there's a lot more that can go into what you can do to augment formal. Performance support. Is there a role for L&D here? I want to suggest, sure. Checklists. Atul Gawande wrote a fabulous book called The Checklist Manifesto that documented the role that checklists make in the airline industry and in the construction industry and in the medical industry, all of which lives are on the line if you don't get it right. And again, owing to our gaps in our cognitive architecture, doing rote things again and again, we tend to skip and forget if we've done it before. Was it this time or the last time that I did it? Checklists help us keep on track. So they're support. Decision trees, helping us know, if they say this, does it mean this or that, and leading people down. Again, our brains don't necessarily remember that well, but we can provide support. Lookup tables. We can't remember large amounts of content, particularly arbitrary content, but if we can provide it out in the world, we can look it up and be more effective and more. Again, these are tools that can be created by operations, but looking across the organization, being systematic about it for L&D is a real opportunity. Social, and really in many ways, this also means informal. You can informally learn on your own, and that's powerful, but also the social interaction starts taking us beyond formal learning. But I suggest when you're doing research, when you're doing troubleshooting, when you're doing design, you don't know the answer when you begin, and that's troubleshooting as well. I mean, that's learning as well, but it's informal learning. And that happens through communication. And then directories that allow people to find the right person to work with instead of who happens to be proximal. Sharing, creating support for people to be able to share their work and start thinking about working out loud, and commenting and providing ways for people to provide input to other people that'll improve their work. There's a lot more that goes into making that work. but mobile becomes a tool to start making that in the moment interaction that can improve the outcomes in the moment and improve your organizational learning over time. And finally, contextual, again, to me, is the magic opportunity, but that requires a lot more than we can cover in introduction. I just want to suggest that digging into contextual is going to be the interesting area going forward. We're beginning to see that, you know, augmented reality in many ways is a contextual support, but I think there's more we can do. And we're doing location-based stuff, but how about, you know, not just where we are, but when we are? Can we do something because of what's coming up next for us? These are opportunities. Thanks, Ellen. I know you say Martha will queue up your question for Clark. I'll take a break here because we're out at transition point and see if there's questions I should be answering. Oh, you mean the forms of curation or mobile learning question? Well, it can be. So curation is something that can happen at the desktop or mobile, but if you happen to be out and see something that is worthwhile, it might be an interesting sign on the wall or the way somebody's done things. I found it interesting to see how different stores are implementing social distancing, which really is physical distancing. My market first had signs in front of the meat department about how far apart you should stand and also how you should line up. Now they have one-way arrows going up the thing. You could snap pictures of that, and if you worked at a different store, and share that and say, hey guys, maybe we should be doing this. So curation can be mobile curation, taking advantage of your current context and sharing that is a unique opportunity that mobile provides that isn't as easy in other ways. And yes, Joe, exactly. Context really is important for taking knowledge and making it manifest in the moment. It's that realizing, you know, and, you know, Michael's been saying this for a long time with his context challenge activity feedback. I still have the what do you call those? the cup hold, you know.
That's great, that coaster, yeah.
Yeah, the coaster, that's the word I was looking for, Michael. Yeah, challenge, context, activity, feedback. But context is part of it. And we learn better when it's contextual, and that's because we have to transfer to context to make it work, and understanding the context and sharing the context really helps make a difference. Moving on. Any other? I'll try and monitor the thing to look at for questions as well. But I mean, quite literally, we have this opportunity in the palm of our hands. And yeah, that's cheesy stock photo, but the idea is right. We really have this, you know, opportunity in the palm of our hands, and we should take advantage of it. And the question is how. And I want to briefly describe some elements of the course that we're going to cover about this, just to help you understand how we're going to be helping you address it. So this is the course that we're offering here with the Allen Academy, thanks to the gracious support of Christopher and Ellen and Michael and the rest of the team. And what we're going to do, there's going to be, you know, the first week, it's 6 weeks. The first week is sort of helping people understand the map, putting the pieces together so we know what is the overview. We're going to go deeper into the definition of mobile. We're going to go deeper into some core ways to think about mobile affordances and map those onto these 4 ways of supporting work. Then we're going to dig into each one. Second week, we're going to really dig into how do we augment formal? What are the things we can do? We're going to, in week 3, we're going to look at performance support. What and how do you do that? How do you understand what the needs are? How do you then develop support? And how does that fit in back to the question Xochitl had about how do they integrate? How do we design in a way that figures out when and where and how they integrate? Week 4, we're going to dig deeper into social and start looking at what does it take to support people. It's more than just having social media tools. It's what can we actively do to be supporting learning in mobile. And then week 5 is where we finally get into the contextual. We look at what it takes to drive that, what the opportunities are, and the tools we may have to do it right now, and how we should be thinking about it going forward. We're not doing, this is not about, you know, mobile development. The tools are changing rapidly, and I argue You have to get if you get the design right, there are lots of ways to implement it. If you don't get the design right, it doesn't matter how you implement it. And, so we're largely talking about knowing how to design it, and then there are lots of ways to develop any particular solution. And finally, at the end, we're going to wrap up. But that particularly includes strategy. Implementing mobile is organizational change initiative. You have to, like any other type of introduction, you have to think about it strategically. And in one sense, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I really want to mention this now. My local ATD chapter asked me to do a talk on mobile learning a year ago. And I said, mobile now? I mean, it's already mainstream. The book came out almost a decade ago. And he's like, Clark, you have to understand, mobile's new to you. A lot of people have just, now's the time to start thinking about it. So really, that's the point, is that we still are lagging. There's still opportunities for mobile we're not taking advantage of, and that's what we really want to get to, and that includes the strategy. In each week, there will be some concepts. I believe, and cognitive science supports having concepts that you can contextualize, gives you tools to design new solutions. So there will be concepts, but there's going to be discussion of them too. We're going to make sure we understand them and have dialogues and debates to make sure we understand what we're really talking about in the opportunities. And there's going to be activities. You're actually going to do some activities in class to really apply it to some fixed things, and then you're going to take it out and apply it to your own situations and bring that back for sharing and feedback. So that's sort of the map. That's the model. That's where we're going. I hope you'll join me. I hope we'll see you there. I would love to have you join us and help us collectively expand our understanding together about what mobile opportunities are and how we can take advantage of them. So really, I want to say thanks. Before I hand back, I want to mention just a couple things. Any thought that ends up in a book, in a presentation, or in a course tends to start out on my blog, learnthis.com. So if you need help sleeping at night, that's a really great place to start. I'm on Twitter, all the books, there's sites for them. You can find out more. I'm struggling right now to get them back up online. A couple of them have gone out of print, so I have versions of them. I'm just getting them ready. One's uploaded and I'm still waiting for it to launch. The other one's coming, but we'll have good pointers to lots of things. And at this point, I want to stop sharing, and I want to hand it back to you folks for comments, questions, and/or announcements.
That was just terrific, Clark. And I think people should see that attending your course would be worth it just for your slides. You have such great visualizations that make the point so well. With all your experience in this, everyone, whether you're a beginner in the field or you've been around for a long time, can really benefit from these concepts and produce better learning experiences that if you have the right perspective, it's not that hard. But if you don't have the right perspective, you can put a lot of time and effort into trying to create learning programs for people, and they just don't work, basically. So great job, really great job.
There's more depth in all of this, which is why we have to spread out over 6 weeks. Can't cover it one webinar.
That's right. So wonder if we have any lingering questions. We have a few minutes left, I think. Isn't that right, Ellen?
That's correct. I was wondering, actually, we had a little bit of a context about what contextualization means. There was a bit of conversation going on in the chat, and I think it'd be good if we could maybe spend a couple more minutes defining what we mean by context.
In my particular case, context is where you are now. It turns out, if you look at what cognitive science says about the brain, it used to be that, we were formal logical reasoning machines, and we did, we processed everything in our head, and out came this formal output. And, and depending on our level of excellence, it could be right. But it turns out that's not an accurate picture. And we create our understanding in each instance, depending on the context and interaction between what we know and what is the context. And the context is where you are, what's happening. So if you're, doing a sales call with a different customer in a different situation, and it's early morning versus afternoon, you're tired. One of the things we find out about our brains is cognitive work tires our brain, and we get worse and worse at it through the day until we have some sleep. I love Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, where he mentioned, if you have to see a judge, please, I hope you don't, go early in the day. Their decisions get more harsh throughout the day because their brains get tired and they just resort to simpler solutions. So we are, so the context matters. And when we are in different contexts, we may not reconstruct thinking appropriately in some contexts unless we've worked hard to think about that. But the flip side is, depending on who we are and when we are and where we are, a service technician going to a site visit has a very different set of needs for information resources than a salesperson going to visit that same site. So you want to customize, and you can if you know who they are, what their role is, what context they're visiting. And the same thing, a service technician visiting this site needs different information than a service technician visiting that site. So the notion is there are a lot of elements to make it accurate. I saw in the chat earlier, somebody was mentioning geofencing. Oh, well, we will only bring up this reminder about this thing on your shopping list if you happen to be proximal to the store that has it. Because now it's opportunistic, we can pick it up. It wasn't on your urgent list, but it was like, when I get around to it, pick it up. This system can remember that for you, and you might not. So we're coupling contextual information with our goals and needs and what we know to create solutions that are better than we would have otherwise. I hope, does that help? And please, Michael, elaborate and fill that out.
Well, I think you said that just beautifully, Clark. I think of so much material that's intended to help people, and it isn't until they kind of get to the practicum or the chance to apply it that it now connects. Oh, now I know why you were presenting me with these aids, or I know why you're presenting me with this instruction. Wouldn't it have been so much more helpful to have had that at the beginning? Just the notion of just trust me, someday you'll find this useful does not inspire a lot of engagement in the content. But when you're faced with a problem to solve, which mobile really helps make real, it's more than authentic, right? It's the actual thing. Then you're really truly engaged. If it's preparatory learning, you want something that feels as authentic as possible. So you want that angry customer staring at you and not really wanting you to solve the problem. They just want to they just want to vent, and you need to let them vent and so forth. Those things need to be authentic for you to actually build the skills that are going to work. So there are many ways context is vital to almost every kind of learning. And mobile has unique capabilities that you just outlined for getting that context firmly set. So now I know why I am learning this now. Answers all those questions.
Have any other questions or anything else you want to bring up to our audience about the Academy?
Well, I know that we've got a lot of excitement and many seats already filled for your upcoming course, Clark. So certainly those who are hanging on and around, if this is something that's of interest to you, we'd love to have you just as soon as possible.
Yeah, register now.
register now before the seats are gone.
Yeah. I see Sochil's comment, problem-based learning is a must. Absolutely. We are increasingly seeing evidence that giving people meaningful problems, even the direct instruction people talk about very carefully crafted practice that are real applications. And I wrote a blog post about how actually direct instruction and these sort of problem-based learnings are not at odds. And it's just critical that you really are applying the knowledge in ways that you will be applying it after learning experience for it to be as useful as possible. And that's the notion of, the right challenge in the right context, the right I'm going to rearrange your CCAF, Michael, the right activity in the right context with the right level of challenge and then feedback. That's, if you need to develop those so that they give the best transfer to the situation that people will really face. And that's exactly what you were saying, Michael, about the importance of designing practice that's going to give you the best transfer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Ellen, for filling that in. Yeah. In case you didn't get it from the coaster.
Yeah. Write us and we'll send you a coaster. How's that?
I had a question actually from my own brain for Christopher and Clark, and that's a little bit about first of all, I think a question for Christopher about what geofencing is, because I've never heard that term specifically before. But then also I was curious about maybe social context kind of combined with the idea of location. You get a reminder for something that you have to do when you're in the same spot as somebody else. So I'm curious to hear a little bit of dialogue about those ideas combined.
Sure. Well, just on the geofencing topic itself, it's using your phone and the GPS inside it to be sensing for context. And so we have done some work where students and employees, their phone would alert them when they were going into a situation when they might not have been properly trained. So if they were signing up or had been assigned to go do a job, but they didn't have all the boxes checked for safety, the phone would alert them and alert their manager and let them know that, hey, something needs to be remedied here. And in some cases, it was just signing a form. But in other cases, if they had been assigned to something that they hadn't gotten training for, the manager might think about reassigning people who were there to do different jobs, so the job could be performed safely. A lot like on my phone, when I go near a Starbucks, the phone knows that I'm near a Starbucks and it alerts me and it brings up the payment page, right? And so we can do the same thing with performance support, and we can do the same thing with kind of registration about what's going to happen next in a performance, and make sure that that's well linked to the learning management system, so that you've got people who are certified to do jobs, doing those jobs, and you don't have any risks because you've got someone who says, yeah, I can do that, but has never practiced it before.
And and that's a very specific instance. A more general thing is having a location and knowing when you're proximal to it, and when you set a distance that's appropriate. I mean, so you're within 5 miles of the store. Now, you had wanted eventually, the hardware store, and you'd wanted. It can even be smarter and could say you're looking for X. Now you're suddenly near a store that has X. It's not the only one, but now you're finally near one, and you can go get whatever it is. You need a left-handed monkey wrench. Okay, well, let's get you there. Joe mentions, asks, so your assumption is you always have location services active. In general, yes. That actually ends up getting into the strategy stuff in the very last week, is about policy. What are you going to require your people to do? What can you, or what will you ask them to do? And, do you dictate it? Do you make it an alternative with trade-offs? Do you not try and take advantage of it at all because it entails too many problems? These are interesting choices we have to wrestle with. Exactly, the personal privacy is it. I was really interested, the Android and Apple are collaborating, Google and Apple, I guess, are collaborating on a proximity detector. But there's a beautiful comic that explains why it's not violating your privacy, how it's using randomly generated codes. And then it only recognizes if you've seen the same code, it doesn't know who it's from, but it knows you were near that person, and that code has been flagged as somebody who was diagnosed with the virus. So suddenly, you know, now you've been exposed, and yet you don't know anything about the person. The system doesn't know anything about a person. All it knows is that those two randomly generated codes ended up showing up in the same location. So there's a lot of issue that goes into, you know, there's no right or wrong, there are trade-offs. There's no right answer, there are trade-offs. Ellen, your question was sort of about social geo. And that's an interesting issue, which I don't think has been explored a lot. The opportunity to, you know, there have been apps that say, way back, I think in particular Japan, they were doing sort of a dating thing where if two people who were looking to meet somebody else ended up being in the same place, the device would ping and say, you two should go meet each other, look for this person. And but you could do that on intellectual aspects instead of, you know, romance. We might make it about personal interests. You're both interested in paintings, or you're both interested in knitting, or whatever it is. And for work-related purposes, it could be you're both part of the community of experts, or this is a person who's known in a field you're really interested in, see if you can make a connection. It's just that using location and other information in interesting ways. And it's that other information, some of it can come from sensors, some of it comes from databases, and you put it together. Sorry, you're getting me into design.
Of course I am. I'm a designer. Well, this is really interesting because I think, you know, bringing the social component into the mix here really ties into some of the questions that Joe and Kathleen have been discussing in chat, which is, what are some of those additional considerations about privacy, and what questions do you ask about your product and your audience to get you at the right level of balance for that personally identifiable information, which is PII. And, you know, if it's a required application, are people bringing their own devices? I think it gets really complicated. So what are some of the questions people can ask to make sure that they're getting at the right level of balance between productivity and privacy?
Partly it's what can you expect of people, but we actually have a lot of information, Ellen, about people. We know what they know based upon their transcripts in the LMS. We know what their role is, but and sometimes we make a mapping with competencies and development paths, but we're not using that about where they are, and we can start mapping that information as well. So in one sense, we can use information we already have to do a bunch of determinations. It's just connecting it new ways. We do want to be mindful of privacy, and we want to communicate that. We are going to use this information for this purpose, but we're only going to use it for this purpose, and we will or won't use it against you. I very much don't like organizations that will hold information against you. What was the one where we will always cut the lowest 10% of everybody in every job role? That's not, to me, a good policy. For them, they thought it was a proactive policy. I think it's less successful than saying we're going to focus our attention on improving those 10%, raise them up to the middle line, or whatever it is. I don't know that there's any systematic way except being sensitive. A colleague of ours is doing an online accessibility course, and part of it's just making you aware. If you start being aware of privacy issues, then you can start factoring that into your decisions. And then you have to go look at, what are good principles? What do your lawyers say? What are your HR policies? And then how do we want to be as an organization, as a designer? And what do we want to do with our people? And some of it's, how can we best do this stuff that will help the organization in ways that minimize any privacy challenges? Oh yeah, GE under Walsh. Yeah, that was exactly it, Joe. I was being unspecific.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I noticed we're at the top of the hour.
We are. This has been great discussion and a really great presentation, Clark. I do appreciate you joining us today and sharing a lot. I'm excited for your course to start on May 6th.
Me too. With a wee bit of trepidation, you know, I've got to get everything put together, but I certainly have, you know, we will have no trouble filling up that time with lots of fun and things. So I will say thank you. And thank you all for attending and your interactions in the chat. I hope you found it valuable, and let you go.
Yes, thank you so much, Clark, and everyone. It was
Hey, everyone.
a great hour.
Yeah, for sure. Have a great day.